On the day I turned 65, I noticed something strange behind those balloons and forced smiles. Maybe you felt something similar. That quiet pain of being betrayed by the very person who should have protected you. That's when I heard my own son whisper with contempt, "She won't even notice. The clinic is already paid for." After a lifetime dedicated to my family, I was declared incompetent. All for money. The pain almost made me believe I was fragile. But then I found a letter hidden by my husband, revealing a secret fortune and a shocking recording. That night, during dinner, I raised my glass and said, "You think I'm fragile, but you've forgotten that the one who carries the truth is never alone." What happened next changed everything. The living room looked like something out of a catalog. Soft pastel balloons, a happy 65th banner above the fireplace, and the scent of apple pie drifting from the kitchen. People were laughing, but their laughter didn't reach their eyes. My daughter-in-law hugged me too tightly, her smile frozen like a mask. My son kept glancing at his phone, barely making eye contact. Something felt rehearsed. I stood there, surrounded by family, yet more alone than I'd ever been. This wasn't a celebration, it was a performance. When my son handed me a slice of cake, his hands were cold. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, but it felt hollow, like a line he had practiced in the mirror. I watched as he walked away, whispering something to his wife that made her giggle. My heart tightened. No one brought gifts, only sealed, envelopes placed neatly on the table. I noticed people checking the time, their eyes darting toward the hallway. There was a strange tension in the air, like everyone was waiting for a cue I hadn't received. I sat near the window, letting the fading sunlight touch my face. Across the room, the family portrait hung slightly crooked, my late husband smiling beside me, back when life felt whole. I missed his warmth, his quiet presence that made any room feel safe. Now everything felt manufactured, down to the background, music that didn't sound like us. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the unease, but even the smell of the coffee, usually comforting, seemed out of place, too bitter, like something was rotting underneath all this sweetness. From the corner of my eye, I noticed how the silverware was perfectly lined up, how every plate was exactly the same distance from the edge of the table. Nothing in this room had been left to chance, not even me. My daughter-in-law hovered, asking if I wanted more punch, but her tone was clipped. Behind her, someone closed a door quietly, too quietly. I felt like a guest at my own memorial, like they were preparing to say goodbye, without telling me why. Then I heard it, a whisper from the hallway, too low to understand, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. I froze. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. It was just a few words, a quiet exchange. But something shifted in me, the kind of shift that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. I smiled through it, nodding politely, but inside, I knew. Whatever this day was meant to be, it wasn't about me. Not really. And something deeply wrong was hiding just behind that door. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was just walking toward the guest bathroom when I paused by the hallway, distracted by the creak of the old floorboard. That's when I heard it. My son's voice, low and sharp. "She won't even notice. The clinic's already paid." My blood ran cold. I froze, hidden behind the corner wall, barely breathing. His wife let out a soft laugh, like it was all so obvious. "It's for the best," she whispered. My legs turned to jelly. They were talking about me. My heart pounded like it wanted to escape my chest. I wanted to believe I misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about someone else, but then I heard my name. Mom. Clear. Certain. No room for doubt. Once the papers go through, we'll have control over everything. My son continued. She won't fight it. She trusts us. That last sentence broke something in me. Trust. That word tasted like ashes now. I stepped back silently, pressing my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. I returned to the party, but everything felt different. The lights seemed too bright, the voices too loud, like they were trying to drown out the truth I had just heard. I smiled when someone asked for a photo, but my lips trembled. I couldn't stop replaying his voice, the way he said it like I was already gone, like I didn't matter. I looked around and wondered, how long had they been planning this? How many smiles had been lies? Every hug now felt like a betrayal. At the dinner table, I watched them laugh and toast and talk about the future, as if I wasn't even there. My daughter-in-law leaned in to cut my chicken for me, her hand gentle, her voice sweet. But now I knew what was behind that softness. Control, manipulation. They weren't taking care of me. They were silencing me. My stomach churned. I could barely eat. I stared at my plate and wondered how I had become a problem they needed to solve. Later that night, alone in my room, I sat in the dark with the door locked. I tried to tell myself to wait, to gather more proof. But the truth echoed in my ears, like a siren. They wanted me out of my own life. I clutched a pillow to my chest and let the tears come, silent and hot. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I had heard it with my own ears. And I had no idea what they were planning to do next. 2 days after the party, a manila envelope arrived at the door, addressed to me in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. My son handed it to me with a rehearsed smile. "Just something from the insurance," he said casually. But his eyes were tight. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside were papers, legal documents filled with words I struggled to read through the shaking of my hands. The word that stood out bold and cruel: incompetent. My breath caught. This wasn't a mistake. This was a declaration. There were signatures at the bottom. My son's, his wife's. Even a doctor I'd only met once months ago at a checkup. I barely remembered. They had claimed I was showing signs of dementia, that I was forgetting names, repeating stories. None of it was true. Or if I ever forgot a detail, it was the kind of thing anyone forgets at my age. But they turned it into a case, a reason, a weapon. They had prepared this quietly, with strategy. And now, they were ready to erase me. When I confronted my son, he didn't deny it. He just sighed and said, "Mom, it's for your own good." Like I was a child being scolded, not a woman who had raised him, fed him, fought for him. His words were slow, patronizing, like I wouldn't understand. My hands were trembling, but I stood straight. "I'm fine," I whispered. But he shook his head gently, as if I'd proven his point. That was the worst part. Not the lie itself, but the way they made me feel small for resisting it. The next morning, my daughter-in-law began hovering more, offering to handle my medications, asking if I remembered her name, subtly checking the stove even after I'd turned it off. It was all part of the narrative. They weren't just questioning my mind. They were building a case, slowly, carefully, stripping me of my autonomy under the guise of care. I wasn't allowed to drive anymore. My keys vanished from the drawer. Every freedom taken one by one, until even my thoughts began to feel dangerous. I felt trapped inside my own skin. No one believed me because they didn't see what was happening behind closed doors. I was becoming a shadow in my own home, my voice quieter, my confidence shaken. But deep down, A spark remained. I knew who I was. I remembered every birthday I'd planned. Every night I stayed awake for that boy. They wanted me erased. But I wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. And something inside me whispered, "Keep watching. They'll slip." I started keeping things to myself. Every question I asked seemed to confirm their suspicions. "Do you remember where we're going today?" my daughter-in-law would ask with a too-sweet voice. I'd nod, pretending not to notice the pen in her hand, ready to document a slip-up. I stopped asking for details. I smiled, played along, stayed quiet. I became a spectator in my own life. It was safer that way. But inside, I was screaming, and no one could hear me. They thought I was fading, and I let them believe it. But I began watching more closely. I noticed how they spoke in code around me, switching to whispers when I entered the room. How they exchanged looks, quick, loaded, guilty. At night, I'd lie in bed and replay every moment, every phrase. The worst part wasn't the isolation. It was the gaslighting, the way they tried to make me doubt myself, my memories, my sanity. Like I was a ghost floating through rooms I once ruled. The house felt colder now, sterile, like a hospital pretending to be a home. The walls once covered in family photos had been rearranged, some pictures removed entirely. I wondered if they thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. I noticed everything. I wrote small notes to myself and hid them in my drawer, just to prove I still could. Sometimes I'd whisper facts into my recorder, anything to preserve truth. I wasn't slipping. I was surviving. Quietly, carefully. My son stopped calling me Mom. He used my first name now, like I was someone he barely knew. It stung more than I expected. Stripping away my title was just another way to rewrite the story, to remove the version of me that had authority, history, power. They dressed it all up as love. "We're just worried," they'd say. "We want to protect you." But it felt like being buried alive with silk sheets and soft music. Polite cruelty disguised as concern. One morning, I caught them going through my drawers. They jumped when I entered the room, fake smiles instantly plastered on their faces. "We were just organizing," she chirped. I nodded, but something broke open inside me. This wasn't protection. This was a takeover. They weren't waiting for me to fall apart. They were helping it happen. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. If they were building a case, I'd build one of my own. It was a rainy afternoon when I opened the old cedar chest in the attic, searching for a blanket. The smell of dust and lavender hit me all at once, a scent that instantly brought back memories of my husband. I hadn't opened that chest since his funeral. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, revealing photo albums, postcards, and little souvenirs we had collected over the years. I wasn't expecting anything more than nostalgia, but tucked beneath a stack of faded letters, I saw it, a sealed envelope with my name in his handwriting. I froze. The handwriting was unmistakable, strong, deliberate, loving. My breath caught as I slid my fingers under the seal and pulled out the letter. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the words were clear. "If you're reading this," it began, "then something's gone wrong." My chest tightened. His words were direct, protective. He wrote that he had always suspected our son's intentions, especially after the incident at his mother's funeral. He'd seen the hunger for control in his eyes. He had tried to protect me, even after death. The letter went on to reveal a secret account overseas. "Only you have access," he wrote. I didn't trust anyone else. My hands shook as I read the details. Account numbers, passwords, the name of a trusted contact. He had left everything for me, just in case. But it wasn't the money that made me cry. It was knowing he had seen me. That even in his final days, he had known I would need strength to face something unthinkable. He hadn't left me powerless. He had left me prepared. Folded inside the envelope was a flash drive. I plugged it into my old laptop, heart pounding like a drum. There it was, a recording. I pressed play, and the sound of my son's voice filled the room. Clear, calculated, cold. He was speaking to someone on the phone. "She won't last another month," he said. "Once she's out of the picture, we can finally move forward." I covered my mouth, trembling. There was no more doubt, no more excuses. The truth was raw, recorded, undeniable. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't from sadness. They were from clarity, from validation. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being hunted in my own home. But now, I had evidence. Real, damning, impossible to ignore proof. I looked at the letter one last time, then tucked it back into the chest. And in that moment, one thought echoed through me like thunder. They thought I was weak, but they have no idea what I'm about to do. I played the recording again, and again. Each word cut deeper than the last. My son's voice, so familiar and now so foreign, filled the room with venom. "She's just a signature away from disappearing," he said, followed by a chuckle. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could the boy I raised speak about me like this? I had kissed scraped knees, stayed up through fevers, worked overtime to buy him his first car, and now I was just an obstacle to be removed. The more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just a passing thought. It was a plan, coordinated, discussed, executed. He mentioned dates, contacts, the clinic's name. He talked about money, about control, about cleaning up loose ends. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated erasure. I paused the recording and stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible. I didn't look broken. I didn't look weak. I looked like someone who had been underestimated for far too long. I wanted to scream, to burst into the living room and confront them with the truth. Wave the flash drive in their faces. Watch their smug expressions dissolve into panic. But I didn't. Not yet. I knew better than to strike in anger. My husband had taught me that. Timing is everything, he used to say. So instead, I sat in silence and let the rage simmer. I memorized every word of that recording, every pause, every lie. They thought they were smart, but I had something they didn't. Proof. That evening, they called me for dinner like nothing had happened. My daughter-in-law commented on how lucid I seemed, while my son asked if I'd taken my pills. I smiled, nodding gently, the recording echoing in my mind. I watched them laugh, eat, clink glasses. Every movement, every word felt like a scene in a play they had rehearsed too many times. I said very little, choosing my silence with care. Inside, I was rehearsing too, rehearsing my moment, the moment when the roles would reverse. Later that night, I hid the flash drive in a place only I knew. I wrote down details in a notebook I kept under my mattress. Names, dates, everything. I didn't trust anyone, not even the lawyer they had brought over weeks ago. I'd seen how he looked at my son. No, this would be handled my way, quietly, strategically. And when the moment came, they wouldn't even see it coming. Because while they were planning to erase me, I was preparing to expose them. The table was set beautifully that night, White linen napkins, polished silverware, soft candlelight flickering against the wine glasses. They called it a special dinner, but I knew exactly what it was. A goodbye. Not the warm kind, but a quiet dismissal disguised as elegance. My son carved the roast with ceremony, his wife beaming beside him. I sat at the head of the table just like always, but everything had shifted. I wasn't the matriarch anymore. In their eyes, I was already gone. They talked about plans. A peaceful place with gardens, my daughter-in-law said. Somewhere you can rest with professionals to help you, my son added. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Every word was a lie, a carefully crafted lullaby meant to put me to sleep forever. I stirred my soup in silence, letting the moment build. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. So was I. Because I knew what was coming, I waited until the wine was poured, until the mood was just right. I lifted my glass, clearing my throat gently. Their eyes turned toward me, expectant, amused, maybe even relieved. I smiled, calm and steady. To family, I said. To truth. My son raised an eyebrow. I stood up, glass in hand, letting the silence stretch just a second too long. Then I spoke. You think I'm fragile, but you forgot something. The one who carries the truth is never alone. My voice didn't shake. I looked each of them in the eye as I said it. My daughter-in-law's smile faltered first. My son's hand froze midair. The flash drive was in my pocket, the letter safely hidden, and their world, this carefully built illusion, was beginning to crack. I saw it in their eyes, confusion, then fear. They didn't know what I had, but they knew I had something, and suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the threat, the one thing they couldn't control. I sat back down, slowly, savoring the silence that followed. They didn't speak for the rest of the meal. I could feel their panic rising beneath the surface, masked by clumsy small talk and forced smiles. But it was too late. The roles had shifted. They had planned a farewell. But they were the ones about to be left behind, because the next move was mine, and they had no idea what I was capable of. The morning after the dinner, I woke up before the sun. The house was silent, still heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. I packed, slowly, deliberately, folding only what I needed, no hesitation. I didn't cry. I didn't second-guess myself. Every movement felt like a quiet rebellion. I left the jewelry box on the dresser, untouched. I wasn't taking memories. I was taking back my power. I didn't say goodbye. I simply walked past the kitchen where my daughter-in-law stood frozen, coffee in hand. My son appeared behind her, his face pale. "Where are you going?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. I turned to him, calm. "Where I belong," I said. No yelling, no drama, just truth. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence between us said more than anything ever could. Outside, the air was crisp, clean. I filled my lungs and let it out slowly. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. The driveway, the garden, the front door. None of it held me anymore. I was no longer the caretaker of a house built on lies. I was a woman stepping into her own story. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt whole, steady, seen. I took a cab to a place no one expected. A little cottage by the sea that my husband once told me about. He had almost bought it before he died. I had the keys now, and the funds to make it mine. I unpacked, made tea, and sat by the window as the waves rolled in. No more pretending. No more whispered threats. Just the sound of the ocean and the memory of a man who believed in me when no one else did. They could keep the house, the inheritance, even the lies. I didn't need any of it, because what I had now couldn't be stolen. My voice, my clarity, my freedom. And as I watched the tide rise and fall, I realized something powerful. Sometimes walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the beginning of everything. I didn't go to the police. I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't need to make noise to be heard. Instead, I made copies of the letter, the account details, the recording, and sent them to the right people. My husband's old friend at the bank, a contact he'd trusted in legal affairs, quiet hands that knew how to move behind curtains. No threats, no announcements, just truth, delivered with precision. And then I waited, calmly, without fear. A week passed, then 2. I received a letter, official, discreet. The power of attorney was revoked. My medical records were being investigated. Their plans were unraveling, thread by thread, without me ever raising my voice. I didn't need to prove my sanity. The facts spoke louder than any testimony. Every lie they had told was documented. And slowly they began to realize that the woman they tried to silence had outsmarted them all. My son called once. I didn't answer. He left a message, his voice shaking. "Mom, we need to talk." But the time for talking had passed. He had a chance to protect me, to honor what we had. Instead, he chose greed, control. I let the phone ring the next time, and the time after that. There's a certain kind of justice in being unavailable, in removing access, in letting them sit with their choices in silence. I never wanted revenge. I wanted peace. And that's exactly what I found in the quiet mornings by the sea, sipping coffee and reading old letters from a man who loved me completely. My justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It came in the form of clarity, of autonomy, of knowing they could never touch me again. They had tried to bury me in false narratives, but I wrote my own ending, and it was stronger than anything they'd imagined. Some nights I still hear their voices in my mind, soft, condescending, certain they had won. But now I smile, because I know how wrong they were. Justice didn't look like a courtroom. It looked like a locked door, a reclaimed name, a woman who refused to be rewritten, and that silence they left behind. It wasn't absence, it was consequence. The sea became my rhythm. Every morning I opened the windows and let the breeze wrap around me like a soft shawl. I walked along the shore, collecting shells and thoughts. No more schedules. No more eyes watching my every move. Just space. Real, sacred space. To exist as myself. Some days I wrote in a journal. Others I simply sat still. In the quiet, I remembered who I was before the noise. And she was still there, just waiting. I found joy in the smallest things. A robin nesting near my window, the way the kettle sang when it boiled, the scent of salt clinging to the air. Peace didn't come all at once. It arrived in layers like soft waves erasing old. Footprints. I didn't need to rebuild my past. I just had to honor it. My husband's voice sometimes echoed in my thoughts. Not in sorrow, but in steady encouragement. You've always been stronger than they knew. And now, I believed it too. Sometimes I imagined what they might be doing, sitting in that house, wondering how it all slipped away. Maybe they looked for someone to blame. Maybe they still told themselves a version of the story that made them feel justified. But that no longer concerned me. I wasn't part of their version anymore. I had stepped out of the frame, and in doing so, I had reclaimed everything they tried to take. My dignity, my truth, my name. There were no apologies, no letters asking for forgiveness. Just silence, thick and final. And I didn't need anything more. I had made peace with the idea that not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with freedom. Some end with a woman walking barefoot along the edge of the water, letting the past drift out to sea. And in that simplicity, I found something priceless. Not justice, not revenge, but grace. Quiet, radiant, unshakable grace. So if you've ever been made to feel small, invisible, or replaceable, hear me now. You are none of those things. You are the keeper of your story, and no one gets to rewrite it without your permission. Where are you watching from? Share your city and age in the comments. I'd love to know who you are. And if this story touched something deep in you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it.